Once inside the city, the ground was noticeably cleaner, so walking became much easier. The Taoist strolled leisurely along the street, passing through the city. He slowly made his way back to Willow Tree Street. The willow trees were lush and green in the height of summer, and there was a small building with a flag bearing the character Tao at the entrance. The shop sign read Rodent Extermination, but the main door was tightly locked. There were no vendors setting up stalls outside, making it quite tranquil. It seemed as if no one knew that the recent uproar concerning the Grand Commander's residence was caused by the Taoist living here. The Taoist walked over and opened the door. Creak! He opened the door and then closed it behind him. However, the wooden door wasn't very secure. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the cracks, casting slanted beams of light across the dim room. At first, his eyes weren't used to the light, and he felt it was a bit dark. But after a moment, he was able to catch the scattered rays illuminating the interior. There was hardly any change in the house. The dim room contrasted sharply with the bright light outside, the blazing sun with the coolness inside, creating a typical summer atmosphere. Sigh, the Taoist sighed, unloaded his satchel and plopped down onto a tall stool. Sigh, there was another soft, gentle sigh. A little girl in a three-colored dress mimicked his sigh and, turning her back to the tall stool, jumped up beside him to look over at him. Resting after labor was the best feeling ever. The Taoist sat there, and the girl followed suit, both unconcerned about the passage of time. As dusk approached, and the Taoist grew tired of sitting, he finally stood up to retrieve his bundle. The little girl jumped down from the tall stool and followed him, tilting her body and cocking her head to watch him unfasten the oilcloth, open the box, and take out the painting. The Taoist ignored her in this process. This painting, when rolled up, was over a person's length, but when unfolded, it transformed into its width, becoming a horizontal scroll that was nearly as long as a person. A horizontal scroll, also known as a hanging scroll, was primarily distinguished from a hand scroll by its ability to be hung on the wall. Xianxia ascended to the second floor and surveyed the room. The room was neither large nor small. Due to their poverty, the walls were bare, offering a plain surface. He took out the hooks he had purchased on the way and carefully measured the width. Pressing it against the wall, it embedded itself deeply into the surface. He carefully hung the painting, and it fit perfectly. The Taoist then stood in the room in front of the painting, quietly admiring it and contemplating its profoundness. At some point, the little girl had transformed back into a cat and was crouching at his feet, silently gazing up at the painting with him. He had already seen the painting once in front of Dr. Kai's hut on Mount Bacon, but seeing it again now filled him with awe, as he had new insights. Moreover, hanging it up and observing it closely was, of course, different from the rough display Master Du had given him on the mountain. The painting exuded a spirit resonance and profound mysteries that were breathtaking. Who said that the spiritual resonance and profound mysteries were exclusive to Tao cultivators? Both Master Du from back then and Master Kong today were merely mortals, yet their skills reached the divine. When Master Du wielded his brush, he created a world, and when Master Kong chiseled with his knife, a wooden cat came to life. How many Tao cultivators in the past and the future could achieve such mastery? Counting the ancestors of Hidden Dragon Temple throughout the generations, each had their strengths, but how many have reached the end of their chosen path? How many possessed the skill in cultivation that matched Master Du's artistry in painting or Master Kong's craftsmanship in sculpture? Could this not be called divine? What was even more astonishing was this process. The Taoist couldn't help but ponder again, just like he had at Master Kong's home in Yizhu. What kind of world was this? A painting that was originally ordinary. No matter how advanced the technique, no matter how exquisite the pigments, no matter how rare the paper, how could it possibly connect with the profound mysteries of the world, nurturing natural spiritual resonance, and ultimately form a world of its own? Within this process lay an extraordinary answer. It represented the essence of the world and the endpoint of the Tao. Back at Master Kong's home in Yizhu, everything had been fleeting and unclear. Xianxia couldn't leave behind the cat that sought freedom simply because he wanted to cultivate or gain insights. Now, it was different. This painting hung in his home, allowing him to look at it slowly. He could reflect on it gradually and ponder over it at his own pace. This journey truly felt like a remarkable opportunity. He had to thank Master Du and thank Sir Du once more. Now that he observed it, he grew increasingly amazed. He was gradually captivated by its spirituality and profound mysteries, unable to pull himself away. Time passed without his notice. The cat at his feet had yawned countless times and changed its posture many times. It left and returned repeatedly, occasionally glancing at the Taoist, tugging at his pant leg. When it saw him ignoring it, it would give up and lay its paws down as it shook its head. It would wander off to play for a while, only to return after some time. This back and forth continued. The sky gradually darkened, and the painting became indistinct. The Taoist suddenly jolted awake. Looking down, he saw the cat beside him, lying on the ground yawning but mimicking him, gazing up at the painting. As if sensing something, she turned her head to meet his gaze. The Taoist pondered for a moment, gaining some clarity, and looked back at the painting. Just now, in his daze, he had lost track of time. Because of the earlier experience at Yunding Mountain, he was afraid that if he stayed here, he would unknowingly lose a long stretch of time again. However, reflecting now, the reason he had lost track of time was merely because he was immersed in the painting, immersed too deeply, not due to any more profound matter. And every kind of insight in the world should be unique. Although this painting hid a rare spiritual resonance and profound mysteries, everything at this moment was different from the situation at Yunding Mountain. That experience, after all, was likely impossible to replicate. Moreover, since he was viewing a painting, he wouldn't be able to see it anymore once it got dark. Taoist priest, what's wrong with you? It's nothing, the Taoist replied, lowering his head to ask, are you also watching the painting with me? Since you're looking at it, I'll look too. Have you discerned any insights? What do you mean by insights? Just insights. Then what insights have you discerned? I've discerned a little. Then I've also discerned a little. Is that so? The Taoist nodded, feeling quite pleased. Since the Taoist was watching the painting here, Lady Calico naturally had to be here as well. If the Taoist could discern some insights, then it was only right that Lady Calico could discern a little too. The Taoist then extended his hand, flicking his fingers, and several streams of spiritual energy flew into the painting before vanishing without a trace. He then turned around and went downstairs. Having walked a lot of muddy paths over the past 2 days, his shoes were caked with mud, and his Taoist robe had also gotten quite dirty. Taking advantage of the remaining daylight, he needed to wash them. The calico cat shook its head and immediately perked up, its 4 little paws scurrying quickly as it followed him downstairs, then sitting beside him to observe as he washed his clothes. It stood out as a loyal companion. Taoist priest, why don't you change into another outfit? That way, it wouldn't get dirty and you wouldn't need to wash it. I don't have your ability. You're very impressive. But I'm still not as impressive as you, Lady Calico. That's true. The Taoist continued to keep his head down, diligently washing. In the following days, the Taoist only opened and closed the door a few times to go out and buy meals. Otherwise, the main door remained tightly locked. Sometimes, he wouldn't even go out for food, instead asking Lady Calico to go. Most of the time, he stood upstairs, facing the painting on the wall. He would stand there for an entire day. Just in time, he had received the 10 taels of silver given by the water ghost at Jade Belt River. The money borrowed by heroine Wu from people in the jianghu, and her earnings from selling swords and knives at the ghost market had also been shared, with more than half going to Lady Calico. Over these days, the Taoist and Lady Calico didn't need to cook for themselves and could eat out every day. This was also a good opportunity to teach Lady Calico the concept of money, how to use it, and how to interact with people to avoid being deceived in the future. It would also help her practice her arithmetic skills. A little praise when they returned would give her a sense of accomplishment. It was a way to show his attitude. It's like when the Taoist left the city on a brief visit. Though it seemed like only a few short days, the tightly shut door and the removal of the exorcism sign were enough to signal his attitude, thoughts, and preferences to the powerful and elite who received the news. Now that he was back home, he could easily open the door, but leaving it closed for a few more days would serve as a clearer signal. After some time, when he finally opened it, most of the perceptive, understanding, and polite individuals would no longer come around. Lady Calico often transformed into human form to write downstairs for most of the day, occasionally coming upstairs to glance at him. Sometimes she would turn back into a cat and run out to play. She would catch cicadas on the willow trees, sunbathe at the door for a nap, or engage in playful fights with other cats. Naturally, the nightly mouse-catching sessions were also a must. The heroine had sent over some grass ropes she had woven for them to repel mosquitoes. In return, Lady Calico presented a few mice as a gift. Until one evening at the end of May, the Taoist finally took a break. He stretched and stepped outside. He changed into a set of ordinary clothes and went out for a walk. With the approach of the 3 hottest periods in the summer, the heat increased day by day. The weather often felt muggy, only to cool off a bit by evening. However, there was a breeze this evening, making it pleasantly refreshing. After wandering around for a bit, he arrived at a tea house diagonally across the street. He ordered a pot of good tea and sat in a corner to sip it slowly. He waited for the light to dim. Changing didn't have a nighttime curfew, and there were still quite a few people enjoying tea in the evening. Some were playing gambling games, others were listening to storytellers, and some gathered to share things that were meant only for friends. Next door, a few scholars were drinking tea while appreciating celebrated writings. Songyu listened for a moment and quickly realized that it was a record of the incident on Yunding Mountain written by Xianxia. Master Qi's article is indeed well written. Finally, we have a good piece of work, one scholar nodded and said. Master Qi is well-educated and talented, with outstanding writing skills. However, he has long been confined to books and has not ventured into the vast world, another scholar replied. But since Master Qi was exiled to the remote region of Pingzhu, his perspective and mindset have naturally changed, especially after encountering an immortal. Thus, it's no surprise he produced such a fine piece. In my view, it also benefited from the immortal's aura. This story is inherently intriguing. If he just writes it truthfully, it will be a masterpiece. If it's well written, it may be able to endure through the ages. Mr. Otai, you make a valid point. However, Master Qi, being just a frail scholar, actually had the courage to climb over the iron chain. That's not something ordinary people can do. The insights gained from crossing the iron chain aren't something just anyone can write about. Moreover, if it weren't Master Qi but someone else who encountered an immortal, it would likely be difficult for them to travel together. Even if they did, they might not reach Yunding Mountain. Truly enviable. Exactly. Hearing this, the Taoist beside them felt a sense of comfort in his heart. The sky is getting darker. It's just the right time to share some tales of immortals and ghosts, along with some stories from the capital. A slightly plump storyteller stepped out, flicking his folding fan to cool his slightly sweaty face. Let's all enjoy the breeze while you listen. Immediately, some familiar patrons below asked, "What will you tell us today, sir?" Not long ago, I'm sure everyone has heard about the incident at the Grand Commander's residence. The authorities have also issued a notice explaining what happened, the storyteller said. He continued, yesterday afternoon, the demon who deceived the Grand Commander with wicked sorcery was captured by the officers. It's quite lamentable that such a dignified Grand Commander could be so foolish in his old age. What did the demon look like? Wasn't some three-headed, six-armed creature, nor a hulking beast. It was just a talented eccentric from the jianghu who could wield sorcery. He was short and thin, with a tuft of goat-like beard. I heard that tomorrow morning he will be paraded through the streets. He's likely to pass by here as well. If you wish to see him, just grab a stool and sit by the roadside, the storyteller continued. He suddenly widened his eyes, his tone shifting to something more sinister, as if trying to create a peculiar atmosphere that drew attention. Don't underestimate this person just because he doesn't look impressive. The crowd instantly fell silent, all eyes fixed on him. The storyteller was quite pleased with their reaction, clearly adept at drawing in his audience. He then snorted coldly. This demon managed to fool the Grand Commander and brazenly cast his spells under the very nose of the Emperor, in the capital itself. How could he lack any real skill? The audience grew even quieter at this revelation. Little insider information. The storyteller lowered his voice. I heard that after the demon escaped, it was only with the help of the state preceptor's subordinates from the Jiangxian mansion that they discovered where he fled. Then, the masters of the Jiangxian mansion, together with the martial guards and the imperial army, pursued him, resulting in many casualties before finally capturing him. That's impressive. Gasps of surprise rippled through the crowd. At this moment, the Great Yan was in a period of prosperity, with its national strength robust. On one hand, people took pride in this achievement, recognizing the court's power. They felt that the emperor's way was lofty and that even the celestial emperor and Buddha must yield to it. On the other hand, they fully trust the capabilities of the Jiangxian mansion, the martial guard, and the imperial army. They believed that no matter how skilled the jianghu masters were, with such a formidable force from the court, capturing him should be quite easy. Thus, they expressed their astonishment. This, to some extent, reflected the mindset of the citizens of Changing at this time. In times of prosperity, the government appeared powerful and godlike. Therefore, I'd like to advise everyone here. Tomorrow, when the authorities parade that man through the streets, there might be people throwing stones and vegetable leaves at him just for fun. Please don't do that. The storyteller continued. Not that I think he could cause any more trouble under the authorities' watch, but who knows if this demon has any other tricks up his sleeve. If any of you end up attracting bad luck, it won't be worth it. After saying this, he quickly lowered his voice, adopting a submissive stance. Of course, this is just based on my years of storytelling experience, and I'm only advising you for your own good. You've all spent money, and you are my patrons. I can't let you suffer any loss, can I? Cheers erupted from the audience below as the sound of coins jingling filled the air. The guests laughed heartily, not thinking too deeply about it. In their moment of joy, they tossed a few coins up to the stage. The storyteller thanked them with a bow, then added, "But please, do not spread this around. The authorities would surely love for the common folk to throw more stones and vegetables at that demon. If I advise against such behavior here and the authorities hear of it, they will certainly be displeased." The implication was that he was risking the ire of the officials for their sake. The sound of coins jingling continued from the stage. Xianxia couldn't help but smile. This man was quite skilled. It was clear to him that much of what the storyteller said was false or merely conjecture, and even the claim that many officials died trying to capture the demon was likely untrue. However, Xianxia still found it amusing. He lifted his cup to drink tea, glancing outside. Changing had already fallen into darkness. Though there were lights, they were nowhere near as bright as in later times. They paled in comparison to the well-lit streets of the eastern part of the city. The streets were pitch black. The light in the houses was dim, barely sufficient to see by, reminiscent of power outages in rural areas in his past life. The people moving about on the streets were mere shadowy figures against the darkness. At the entrance of the tea house, many people leaned against the walls, soaking in the storyteller's tales of gods and demons while passing the summer hours. Such entertainment was quite enjoyable. However, the tea was a bit bitter. Word had it that there was a tea house in Changing called the Annal Pavilion, renowned for its tea artistry, considered a unique treasure of Changing and a pioneer of tea culture in the world today. One wondered where it might be and how much silver would be needed to enjoy an afternoon there. At this moment, the Taoist had a considerable sum of money in his wallet. That Grand Commander is senile, indulging his son to the point where he behaves lawlessly in Changing and acts wantonly. Now that he has also been influenced by demonic magic, it has become an even greater taboo in the court. In my opinion, the Grand Commander's family should be expelled from the capital. Yet, until now, His Majesty has shown no intent to do so. What do you think is the reason? Of course, it's because the Chang family is related to the Empress. I doubt that. Then what is the reason? As you all know, the master who punished the Grand Commander's son is a divine immortal descended to Earth. But you seem to have forgotten that, when the deity left, he said that if the son and the steward acted kindly in the future, they could return to Changing. Upon hearing of their good deeds, they could restore their former status. If they were expelled from the capital, where would the divine immortal go to find them when he returned? If the divine immortal wants to find them, how could he possibly fail? The voices in the tea house continued to rise and fall, and compared to the brothels, this place felt much more casual. The Taoist had finished his tea and stood up to leave. At the end of May, the stars filled the sky in the peak of summer. As pedestrians walked along, they seemed unaware of their surroundings. Just as he approached his front door, he saw a figure leap down from a second-floor window, landing directly on the ground, then stumbling up and running off into the distance. In the dim night, the figure collided with several pedestrians, resulting in a chorus of discontent from the crowd. The Taoist paid no mind and walked straight back home. The inside of the house was even darker than outside. Just as he lit the oil lamp, a calico cat peeked out from the stairway and said, "Taoist priest, someone came into our house just now to steal something. Did you scare him away?" Just as I was about to chase him off, he jumped out the window and ran away. That must mean Lady Calico scared him off. Really? The cat's eyes widened as it stared at him. Maybe. Holding the oil lamp, the Taoist walked into the inner room to fetch water and wash up. The calico cat quickly descended the stairs to follow him, tilting its head to look at him. Was that person trying to steal our money? Probably trying to steal a painting. Oh, the cat seemed to let out a sigh of relief. Lady Calico, what do you think? I think, since we have some money recently, how about I take you to the Annal Pavilion for tea? The Taoist asked while washing his face. Is it that bitter water? It's the best tea in Changing. The cat stared at him for a moment before asking, how much will it cost? The Taoist grinned from ear to ear while washing his face. \\\\. He started to open the door. As he had thought, after closing the door for such a long time, many people were already aware of his stance. As he expected, some still came knocking at his door. These visitors weren't all thick-skinned officials and nobles from the city. Some were merely curious or simple-minded. There were also those who hadn't visited for several days and were unaware that he had been closed for nearly half a month, and some genuinely came seeking his help to exorcise evil, dispel demons, or drive away rats. The Taoist received each one of them. However, he had already taken down the sign for exorcism. If someone genuinely needed help, He would go to assist them. If it was an official or noble seeking to build connections, he almost always politely refused, suggesting they seek the local experts in changing instead. As for those who came asking Lady Calico to help drive away rats, he almost never turned them down, wanting to keep her happy. The price for the officials and nobles remained the same as before, 500 Cayenne per visit. Although he dealt with fewer complicated matters, it wasn't as peaceful as he had imagined. A few days later, during the peak of summer, they had fully entered the hot season. Songyu chose a cooler morning to change into ordinary clothes and took a little girl with him to the Annal Pavilion in the Eastern District early on. Even though it was early, there were already many people in the pavilion. Judging by their luxurious attire, most of them seemed to be wealthy individuals. The attendant was very enthusiastic and introduced. "Since this is your first visit, and you've come so early, let me recommend the Xianxia tea. It has a rich aroma, moistens the palate, and is invigorating, ensuring you stay energized all day. However, if you come after mid-afternoon, I wouldn't dare recommend this pot of tea to you. Drinking it then might keep you awake at night." "How much is it?" "It's not expensive, 300 Cayenne per pot, and I'll give you a plate of fruits for free." "Is there anything else?" "Let me recommend the Xianxia tea. This tea has recently become quite popular. Its fragrance is light and long-lasting, and sipping a pot feels like being in the mountains with immortals. It's just 200 Cayenne pot, but no fruit included," the attendant said with a smile. "It's quiet right now, so if you wish, I can invite our best tea master to brew it for you." "What are those few people over there drinking?" "Oh, that's our signature drink, the Xianxia tea. It's favored by the nobility and is brewed with tea art by the shop owner himself, priced at 400 Cayenne per cup. Both its flavor and presentation are exceptional," the attendant explained. He said, "In the past, it was brewed personally by the old shop owner. He's quite old now and has passed the business to the new owner, but the new owner is the old owner's eldest son. His tea skills are truly inherited, and he's just as good." Every time the topic turned to money, the little girl would furrow her brows. This made Lady Calico feel quite distressed. "I like this one. Would you like a cup?" "2 cups. Would you like to order some fruits as well?" "Any recommendations?" "Our shop's homemade dried plums, fine dried meat, osmanthus cake, and green dumplings are all popular. You can mix and match a few items. Our shop guarantees no overcharging." "I'll get a plate of dried meat and a mixed plate of the rest." "All right." The attendant was very diligent and immediately left. The fair and delicate front part of the brows of Lady Calico now had a few small creases, making one want to laugh and also wanting to smooth them out for her. Perhaps she had endured too much hardship, becoming accustomed to it. So, after all this time, she still didn't realize that poverty and lack of money were two different things. The Taoist often felt poor but rarely truly lacked money. "Greetings, sir." A middle-aged man approached, appearing somewhat handsome and dressed as a scholar. After respectfully bowing to Songyu, he sat down on the other side. The attendant brought over a set of elaborate tea utensils. In this establishment, the tea wasn't simply brewed and served. Instead, a dedicated person came to your table to brew it, showcasing their confidence in their skills and allowing you to experience something unique during the process. This tea was likely the best in the Annal Pavilion, personally brewed by the shop owner, who had a reputation for being a refined gentleman. "Is this your first time here, sir?" "Yes, it is my first time." "You're not from Changing?" "No, I'm from Yizhu, and have only recently arrived in Changing." "Yizhu produces tea as well?" "Yes, it does. The tea horse trade market is located there." The shop owner moved gracefully, taking his time. He first retrieved some tea from a jar, placed it in a tea bag, and began to crush it gently with a small pestle while chatting quietly with his guest. "This tea is homemade, but it originally came from Jianghu. It reminds me of my father's youth. One time he traveled to Jianghu, and while passing through a certain place, he randomly chose a restaurant to eat at. The owner gifted him a cup of tea, and although the food was ordinary, the tea surprised my father. He asked the owner about it, and the owner merely mentioned it was local mountain tea. After many inquiries, my father finally obtained this tea and later created the Xianxia tea." "That's quite a coincidence," the Taoist nodded in response. It was hard to tell whether the story was true or not, but it was a common tactic. People often embellished stories about objects or themselves. Sometimes, it wasn't necessary to discern truth from fiction. The shop owner placed the crushed tea leaves into a tea bowl, still moving at a leisurely pace. He repeatedly ground them into a fine powder, then sifted it through a fine mesh, resulting in delicate tea dust. Lady Calico watched intently, her eyes never leaving the shop owner's movements. At times, she seemed eager to see what this expensive tea was made of, while at other moments, she shifted her gaze to the shop owner, perhaps transferring her scrutiny from the tea to him. The shop owner remained composed, focused on his task, seemingly oblivious to her gaze. As the finely ground green tea powder settled at the bottom of the bowl, it was a stroke of luck that the water in the small kettle beside them began to boil almost at that moment. The shop owner moved it aside, waiting for the steam to dissipate before returning it to its place. He then repeated, "This is spring water collected from Mount Chang, sweet and delicious, perfect for brewing tea." The shop owner looked up and smiled as he spoke. "However, it must be boiled 3 times before it's at its best for brewing." You have a discerning taste. That's the essence of tea culture. Mount Chang is quite far away. Yes, it is distant, which makes it precious. I've heard the former shop owner was very knowledgeable about tea. Such praise from the world is often exaggerated. Despite saying this, it was clear that the shop owner was pleased with the compliment. He first added a bit of water to the bottom of the bowl, turning the delicate tea powder into a paste. Then he poured water from a height, causing the mixture to float. At this point, a rich tea aroma began to fill the air, fragrant and refreshing. But that wasn't enough. He still needed to paint on the surface of the floating foam. The shop owner carefully drew, and the Taoist didn't dare to interrupt. Even the little girl watched intently, not blinking. Before long, the surface of the tea in the bowl was adorned with a bamboo grove painting. Though it was merely outlined with simple strokes, it was quite vivid. The other bowl was prepared in the same manner. "Please enjoy," the shop owner said as he rose and bowed, then stepped away with light footsteps. Just as he was leaving, he turned back to glance at Lady Calico sitting across from Xianxia. However, unexpectedly, the Taoist also turned to look at him. Startled, he couldn't help but feel a bit flustered and smiled awkwardly before leaving. "Lady Calico, please enjoy the tea. Why not use my own bowl? Please bear with it." "Oh." The little girl carefully picked up the tea bowl, raising it high so that the rim was nearly level with her eyes. She stared intently at the floating drawing on the tea's surface, seemingly lost in thought. "Lady Calico, don't spill it." "I won't. Don't burn yourself." "I won't either." "I think so too." The Taoist nodded and took a sip of the tea. Indeed, the aroma was delightful, leaving a refreshing taste in his mouth. This method of making tea, while still differing significantly from the clear brewing techniques of his past life, was much closer. At least this bowl of tea didn't have a pile of ingredients thrown in like brewed tea, so its flavor was relatively pure. Unfortunately, the tea painting method hadn't yet become popular nationwide. Most regions still predominantly practiced boiling tea. Slurp, 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 a strange sound came from in front of them. She lifted her eyes and saw the little girl sitting across from her imitating her by taking a sip. However, since her bowl was filled later and her tongue was more sensitive, she didn't anticipate the temperature of the tea. Instantly, she found it too hot and started to suck in air, causing the tea to swirl around in her mouth many times. Yet, she was reluctant to spit it out. Gulp, finally she swallowed it down. The Taoist looked at her and asked, "How is it?" "It's hot." "What does it taste like?" "I don't know." "Eat a piece of dried meat." The Taoist pushed the meat on the table toward her. "Drink when it's cooler." "Oh." The little girl then picked up a piece of meat. The Taoist also took a piece of osmanthus cake. The cake was so delicate that he didn't dare press too hard. It would crumble as soon as it was in his mouth. He had to use one hand to catch the crumbles as he ate. Initially, it didn't seem particularly delicious, but with another sip of tea, the fragrance of the tea blended with the cake crumbs, creating a very gentle texture. The aromas of both the cake and the tea filled every crevice of his mouth. After a while, the tea slowly cooled. Perhaps seeing Xianxia enjoying his drink, Lady Calico finally lifted her tea bowl and leaned forward to take a sip. She even imitated the person beside her, smacking her lips and exclaiming, "Ah!" This time, she truly tasted the flavor. However, what she received in return was a furrowed brow and flickering eyes, as if she were beginning to doubt herself. She placed the tea bowl back on the table and turned to stare blankly at the Taoist beside her. Seeing him still drinking with delight, her doubts grew even stronger, making her feel like the problem lay with her. So, she picked up the tea bowl again. "Tiska." Looking again at the person next to her, the suspicion on her face deepened, and she couldn't help but lean in closer. The Taoist acted as if he didn't notice her actions. The morning light outside was just right. Xianxia occasionally turned his head to glance over. The shop owner had gone to another table, chatting and laughing with a group of familiar scholars while showcasing his tea-making skills. Lady Calico held the tea bowl with both hands, wanting to drink but hesitating. She followed his gaze and said softly, "That person seems a bit strange." "Don't worry about it." Song Yu glanced again before turning his attention away. In truth, he didn't possess the ability to casually see through demons and spirits. He often relied on his clear spiritual energy. However, some demons inherently differed from humans and could be perceived without any special skills. Just like Lady Calico. She appeared to be a beautiful and adorable little girl, but she was perhaps too exquisitely delicate. Her fair and unblemished skin made her seem suspicious. Even if she were dressed up, and despite having learned to read, write, and do simple arithmetic, she would immediately show something amiss the moment a butterfly fluttered by. The shop owner had likely been mingling and changing for quite some time, and his demeanor was nearly indistinguishable from that of a human. Only subtle differences could be detected, which were far from enough to conclude that he was not human. In fact, Song Yu didn't recognize him as a demon either. On the contrary, the shop owner had noticed the peculiarities of Lady Calico, which naturally revealed his own oddities. Changing was indeed a place even demons longed for. However, as long as they were behaving and not harming anyone, Song Yu wouldn't meddle. It was best to remain unaware. So he slowly enjoyed his snacks, occasionally tasting a piece of Lady Calico's dried meat and savoring the fine tea as he leisurely passed the morning. Until the sound of cicadas grew increasingly noisy, the sunlight outside became brighter, and the temperature rose noticeably compared to the morning, which prompted the Taoist to finally stand up and settle the bill. Lady Calico glanced down at the half bowl of tea, furrowing her brow. In the end, she couldn't bear to waste it, mustering her courage to lift the bowl and gulp it down in one go, her small face showing a hint of determination. "How much is it?" "Sir, 2 bowls of tea cost 800 Cayenne. That's a fair amount. Our shop owner said that since you love tea and it's your first visit, you must be fated to meet. He wants to give you these 2 plates of snacks." Upon hearing this, Song Yu smiled. "Please thank the shop owner for me." After paying, he turned around and found Lady Calico standing right behind him, looking at him with a serious expression. "Let's go." Leading her out the door, Song Yu said, "Now you've also tasted the best tea in Changing." It was bitter and astringent. Was it not good? It was bitter and astringent. Then don't drink it again. It costs a lot. Money can be earned again, Song Yu replied with a smile. Speaking of which, you've already experienced 9 of the 10 wonders of changing. 9 really? Yes. I don't remember. It's all right. When you grow up a bit and others mention something about changing, you'll be able to recall it and tell them that you've experienced it too. I've experienced it too. And then they'll be wowed, realizing that Lady Calico has been to so many places and seen so many things that others haven't at such a young age. The Taoist spoke as they walked. The little girl's expression tightened, and she immediately asked, "What about the last one?" "There's still one more." "What about the last one?" "You can figure out that there's a difference of 1 between 9 and 10 right away. You're truly a prodigy." "That's right. I admire you." "What about the last one?" The Taoist pursed his lips, shielding his eyes from the sun. The little girl quickened her pace, her small feet moving swiftly as she ran in front of him, walking backward while facing him. "What about the last one?" "The last one isn't interesting. Today's not interesting either. Kids can't go to that one." "What about kittens?" "Kittens can't go either." "Oh." Only then did the little girl show a look of disappointment. She slowed her pace and turned around, continuing to walk alongside the Taoist. But soon she looked up and said, "The person just now seemed like a monitor lizard." Children always had endless things to say. The Taoist appeared to have a lot of patience and casually asked, "How did you figure that out?" "I've eaten quite a few monitor lizards. They taste about the same as raw chicken. The bones aren't as hard as chicken bones and can be easily crushed." "Do you want some?" "No, thank you." However, the number of demons in Changing was indeed more than Song Yu had imagined, and their relationship with Changing was deeper than he had thought. Many of them had probably lived there for many years. They gradually walked back to Willow Street. There was someone waiting at the entrance. When Song Yu looked over, he found it quite amusing. He had just returned from the demon-operated inn, only to see another demon waiting for him at the door. Interestingly, both of these individuals were among Changing's renowned figures. The woman was dressed in plain white clothes with her face concealed by a veil, and she held a scroll in her arms. Despite the sweltering summer heat, she appeared neither hurried nor anxious, quietly standing at the door with her maid accompanying her. Song Yu recognized her at a glance. It was Miss Wanjiang from the Hexian Pavilion. Her graceful presence seemed to linger in his mind, and the sound of her chin still echoed in his ears. However, with her face veiled now, the Taoist felt a moment of disorientation. He realized that he had already caught a fleeting glimpse of her earlier in front of the Xian pavilion. Xianxia exchanged glances with the little girl and walked over. "Ladies," he looked toward them. He couldn't tell if there were two or just one woman. "Sir," it seemed the two women had only just noticed him, and they both bowed in greeting. Their voices came one after the other. Xianxia hurriedly returned the greeting, then took out his key. While unlocking the door, he asked, "Are you two looking for me?" "Indeed we are," the woman in white replied gently. "Seeing that you had closed the door, we asked the neighbors, who informed us that you left this morning and have been keeping the door open for the past few days. So we decided to wait here for a moment." "I'm sorry for making you wait." As he spoke, the Taoist had already opened the door. "Please come in." "Thank you, sir." The two figures bowed again before following the Taoist inside. The two-story building had a green-tiled roof, and it was surprisingly cool inside. "Lady Calico, why don't you go upstairs to write?" the Taoist said to the little girl, then turned to the two women and added, "Please take a seat." "Thank you." It seemed that the two of them had a master-servant relationship, with one sitting and the other standing. Upon entering the room, the woman removed the white veil that had covered her face, revealing an exquisite countenance. "This morning, taking advantage of the cool weather, I took my child to the Annal Pavilion to enjoy some tea, which is why I closed the door," the Taoist said with a slight smile. "It's hot today, and I appreciate your patience. Please don't take offense." "There's no need for such concern, sir," the woman replied with a smile. "I am Wanjiang from the Xian Pavilion. I had the fortune of witnessing your grace and chin skills at the Xian Pavilion, and I was quite astonished," the Taoist said, pausing for a moment. "May I ask what brings you here today, Miss Wanjiang?" "It's nothing of great importance." Miss Wanjiang slowly unfurled the scroll in her hand, revealing a meticulously framed painting, which she handed to the Taoist. "I believe we've met on 2 occasions before." "Oh," the Taoist looked at the painting and was momentarily taken aback. The artwork depicted a corner of Mount Chang in spring, featuring a long corridor in the mountains where the Taoist and a cat sat side by side, surrounded by breathtaking spring scenery. In the center were the backs of the Taoist and the cat. The Taoist appeared at ease, while the cat seemed languid. Although it showed only their backs, the image conveyed even more charm than a frontal view would have. To say the painting was better than that of Master Du would be impossible, and while it lacked any spiritual resonance or mystery, it certainly couldn't be dismissed as unremarkable. Even an ordinary person could sometimes create an extraordinary work unintentionally, not to mention the artist's skills were not lacking, though they could not quite compare to the divine touch of Master Du. At this moment, the one admiring the painting was indeed one of the figures depicted within it. Miss Wanjiang's soft and gentle voice continued. "Every year, I leave the city to enjoy the flowers, but this year was particularly different. While I was on Mount Chang, I was captivated by the beauty of the apricot blossoms and was eager to paint. I had already chosen the scene depicted in the painting. However, with an accidental glance, perhaps by fate, I happened to see you. You were leading a calico cat to admire the flowers on the mountain and rest. Just from your silhouette, I felt it perfectly matched the mountain scenery. I thought that if I could include you in the painting, it would embody the spirit of the piece. I simply couldn't resist the urge to start painting." He said, "This painting showcases your skills." "My painting skills are modest. It's all thanks to you and your cat," Miss Wanjiang replied with a slight smile. "As long as you don't mind me incorporating you into my work, I'm content. Since it's a matter of fate and a refined affair, how could I dare to take offense?" "What you say is absolutely true, sir. However, even matters of fate and refinement can be complete or incomplete." Miss Wanjiang still smiled. "At the time, I wanted to return the painting to you so that our fate and this refined affair could be complete. Unfortunately, when I laid the final stroke, you had already left. I regretted it for a long time. Later, we met again, but that time you weren't wearing your Taoist robe, and I hadn't seen your true face before. I only caught a brief glimpse of your calico cat in your satchel, but I didn't dare approach. A few steps later, we missed each other again, and I returned, filled with regret once more." She paused for a moment. "Fortunately, later I heard about your immortal deeds from a distinguished listener of the Qin. Today, I came specifically to seek you out and return the painting. Upon seeing you, I confirmed that indeed, both times it was you. Today, I can finally fulfill my wish. If it is a painting you created, why speak of returning it? Thanks to you, I've acquired the divine essence and spiritual energy of the painting. This work is my favorite among all the pieces I've created in my life. With this painting, I already feel content. However, keeping it without your permission would be a transgression. I like it, but it weighs on my conscience. If you also appreciate it, I would gladly gift it to you, making it a beautiful deed. If you're unwilling, I'll keep it to myself, and that too would be lovely." "I see," the Taoist nodded, shifting his gaze from the painting to this woman of great renown in Changing, and asked, "Is your visit simply to return the painting?" "Why do you ask that?" The woman's tone suggested she was not surprised by the question. "I'm curious at heart." "I indeed had other purposes for coming here," the woman replied calmly, as if she had anticipated the question. "I would like to hear more. May I ask where you are from, sir?" "I hail from Yizhu." "What brings you to Changing?" "After traveling to this place, I have paused for a moment's rest." "I envy your carefree and free-spirited life," the woman said with a hint of resignation. "I have been confined here my entire life." "Why do you ask this?" "I only wish to know why you came to the Xianxia pavilion that day." "I've heard that your qin skills are unparalleled, and there are storytellers who have listed your music among the 10 wonders of Changing. I have admired you for a long time, so I saved up enough money to come and experience it for myself," the Taoist explained earnestly. "I see." Miss Wanjiang's tone was similar to before, but she then humbly added, "That's merely the flattery and praise of the world. I am unworthy of being counted among the 10 wonders of Changing. I'm just a merchant running a qin tavern. I hope that my performance on that day didn't leave you disappointed." "Your qin skills are indeed exceptional. It's something I've never witnessed in my life. I can only express my admiration. There's no question of disappointment." "I'm truly flattered." The woman spoke softly to him, and her demeanor and poise while speaking could captivate many literati in Changing. "I dare not deceive you, sir. Since I opened this qin tavern, I have drawn the dissatisfaction of many noble ladies in the city. There are often rumors that I am a demon in human form, or that I have used sorcery to charm people, attempting to ruin my reputation. Recently, I heard of your deeds in the Grand Commander's residence. Thus, I came here to find you, both to return the painting and to seek some reassurance." "I won't hide it from you either," the Taoist replied. "There were indeed people who came to find me and asked me to go to the Xianxia pavilion to see whether you are a demon or if you have used sorcery to captivate others." Upon hearing this, the woman gazed at the Taoist. "However, what I mentioned before was also the truth. The reason I went to the Xianxia pavilion was out of my admiration for your qin skills. I wanted to witness them for myself. The visit was merely a coincidence." "What did you think after seeing it for yourself? Don't you know how you yourself are?" A silence fell over the room. The Taoist looked at the woman as the woman looked back at him. But just a few seconds later, the woman grinned from ear to ear, transforming the atmosphere with her warmth. "Your abilities are like those of an immortal. How could you not see through it?" She shook her head with a bitter smile. "What woman doesn't yearn for eternal youth and unchanging beauty? Though I may raise a gold feeder minor ghost to maintain my appearance and even trade my qin music for money to feed it, this spirit cannot harm anyone. I have never harmed anyone nor used wicked magic to confuse people. I hope you can see this clearly." "Is that so?" The Taoist smiled, finding the conversation quite intriguing. This feeling was reminiscent of his encounter with the steward at the Grand Commander's residence, as he unraveled the steward's layers of thoughts. However, the two situations were different. The steward's lies were aimed at harming him, while the lies of the woman before him were meant for self-preservation. Yet the Taoist's reaction made the woman sense something amiss. After contemplating for a moment, she did not reveal her thoughts but instead asked, "I wonder where the calico cat you brought that day has gone. Didn't you already see it?" The woman looked up at him, then smiled and said, "You truly are a Taoist master. Even the cat you raised has attained enlightenment." "What you say is incorrect. Lady Calico is not a cat I raised. I merely encountered her while descending the mountain. We were fated to meet, and seeing her innocent demeanor and the trouble she caused, we agreed to travel together." "Are you truly so kind to demons?" "All things possess a spirit, and one's good or evil is not determined by their kind or nature." "Then are you keeping her by your side to enlighten her?" "It is she who is enlightening me." The woman fell silent again, gradually understanding. She then composed herself and stood to bow. "Thank you, Taoist master." "Why are you thanking me?" "Though you were unwilling to play along with me, you didn't expose me. You saw that I was not human but did not make things difficult for me." She wore an expression of helplessness. "Shouldn't I be grateful?" "You are too polite." "Indeed, Hidden Dragon Temple truly lives up to its reputation." The woman remained quite helpless. Perhaps this was the frustration of exerting great effort and ingenuity, only to be unraveled by the other party using the most straightforward methods. "You've heard of Hidden Dragon Temple?" "I've heard of it far and wide," the woman replied. However, I have yet to witness the abilities of Hidden Dragon Temple. I was too confident in my own methods of concealment. I have inadvertently embarrassed myself before you, Taoist master. There's no need to feel disheartened, the Taoist said sincerely. Your cultivation skills are remarkably high, leaving one in awe. Your skills in concealment are top-notch. I believe the ancestors of Hidden Dragon Temple wouldn't be able to see through your true form either. How did you see through it? That day was Kingaming. At Kingaming, all things were pure and orderly. The climate was clear and the scenery bright, allowing everything to be seen. The woman's expression tensed up slightly, then she appeared even more helpless. So, you practiced the 4 seasons rotation method. Indeed, Songyu replied. What you actually lost to was the timing, not to me. Your techniques are remarkable. You are also quite skilled. The conversation between the two became notably different as they sat across from each other. Chapter 178. It's excellent, of course. Since the veil had been lifted, Songyu no longer respected the other's privacy and asked directly, You, as a great demon, should be cultivating in the mountains. Yet you conceal yourself in the capital, amassing wealth through your Qin tavern. Why do you disguise yourself so heavily? I dare not deceive you any longer, the woman said, lowering her head before asking, Do you know about Princess Champing? Of course. Then let me explain. The woman sitting opposite him replied helplessly. I am originally a demon from Jianghu. Many years ago, Princess Changping traveled south to Jianghu and formed a bond with me. She showed me kindness. A few years ago, I came to the capital. One reason was to witness the splendor of changing, and the other was to find my benefactor from those days and personally thank her. When she saved me back then, she was unaware that I was a demon. Now that I'm in changing and she knows my true identity, she expects me to repay her kindness, as I have considerable abilities. I have always preferred a free and unrestrained life and never wished to be bound. However, I must repay her for saving my life. If I don't repay her, my cultivation will stagnate right here. Upon hearing this, the Taoist remarked, You're quite appreciative and polite. The woman simply shook her head in resignation and continued. Back then, there was a famous courtesan in Jianghu who captivated many with her beauty and exceptional Qin music. Later, a powerful noble sought to force her into submission. She was always strong-willed and refused to serve anyone in such a manner, so she jumped into the river and drowned. Coincidentally, I enjoyed plucking the strings of the Qin during my tedious cultivation, and over the years I developed considerable skill. Under the princess's arrangement, I took her name and reputation, paid off her debts, and came to Changing to open this Hexian pavilion. You are too modest. Huh? So, you work for the princess? She said, Don't underestimate the small size of Hexian pavilion. It brings in quite a sum daily. 1, it serves to gather wealth for the princess. 2, those who enjoy listening to music and are willing to spend lavishly are mostly the powerful figures in Changing, including some of the more reclusive elites who are hard to approach. Yet they all gather here, believing I am a master of the Qin, transcending worldly matters, and they speak to me without reservation. Even if I don't engage with them too much, just listening to their idle chatter and occasionally interjecting a few words, I can learn a great deal. Miss Wanjiang spoke with a hint of sarcasm and a touch of helplessness. Unfortunately, they do not know that I am not what they imagine. It seems you feel quite helpless. The Taoist narrowed his eyes, finding the situation amusing. Helpless isn't quite the right word. I just feel that my Qin skills are wasted. Back when I was in the mountains, whenever I plucked the strings, extraordinary phenomena would occur. Yet now, in Changing, I can only occasionally find that feeling when I deeply resonate with the music. Then this time, it was also the princess who heard about your abilities and learned that His Majesty had summoned a Taoist to the palace for a night banquet. So she sent me to investigate your background and strength, the woman said. Upon hearing about your deeds, I guessed you were likely a disciple of the legendary Hidden Dragon Temple, but I did not inform the princess when she inquired. Why not? I don't know, the woman smiled. Perhaps it's fate. Maybe our first encounter at Mount Chang was too beautiful and I didn't want to cause you any harm. Or perhaps I feel that you are not someone who belongs to the court, and that would be too inappropriate. Then I must thank you. Not at all. How will you explain this when you return? I can't bear to trouble you, but the princess has saved my life. The woman paused as she spoke. You are a master from Hidden Dragon Temple, and I have been in Changing for 7 years. You are the only one who saw at a glance that I am not human, and I have heard some things about Hidden Dragon Temple. I will just inform the princess honestly. She is wise and will likely not trouble you. You truly excel at concealment. However, there is one person who guessed that I am not human. Could it be the state preceptor? Indeed. I wonder how you explained it to the state preceptor. I told him I am the spirit of the Gyukin. Wonderful, Song Yu couldn't help but smile. Please excuse my foolishness. I have one more question. Please go ahead. Do you really keep a gold feeder ghost? Of course, would you like to see it? No need, Song Yu found the situation quite amusing. With her abilities, Princess Changping should be able to seamlessly orchestrate the replacement with another woman equally skilled at playing the Qin. Even if someone grew suspicious, she had the means to handle it. If it truly came to a confrontation, with this woman's remarkable cultivation and astonishing ability to conceal herself, the most that could be discovered was merely the fact that she has raised a minor ghost. Even if the state preceptor guessed, he would only conclude that she was not human. Her Qin skills were divine and unparalleled, deserving of respect, and few would doubt or probe further. Even if some might not believe she was human, who would dare to believe that a demon possessed such extraordinary Qin skills? She should be regarded as an immortal among the Qin. Even if not an immortal among the Qin, at least a spirit within the Qin. Truly, things happened one after another. If Song Yu hadn't happened upon the Kingaming season, he wouldn't have been able to rely on the timing. With only the spiritual energy of Kingaming, he likely wouldn't have been able to discern her true form and would have remained in the dark. Now that you know that I am a demon, what do you think? The woman asked, looking at him. Demons and ghosts shouldn't dwell in human cities. The Taoist came back to his senses and honestly stated his position. However, I am neither a city god nor a divine officer from the heavenly palace, just a wandering Taoist. If the demons and ghosts in the city have not caused any chaos, I truly shouldn't interfere. What about the one from Annal Pavilion? Also the same. Thank you, Taoist master. The woman sincerely bowed her head in gratitude. Just a word of advice, please be sure to keep a low profile. The affairs of the court are human matters, and there are people to manage those. You really shouldn't involve yourself. I will keep it in mind. Do you have any other matters? Then I shall take my leave. Please forgive my intrusion. As the woman spoke, she stood up but paused, looking at the painting on the table in front of her. She asked him, Do you still like this painting, Taoist master? I like it very much, the Taoist replied from the heart. Then I shall give it to you. Thank you. Don't mention it, Taoist master, the woman spoke, preparing to leave, but halfway turned back to look at the Taoist. There is one more thing that I must clarify with you. What is it? Though I wove several lies to deceive you, it was merely to conceal my identity. It was a necessity. However, our encounter on Mount Chang that day was truly a fateful coincidence. Feeling inspired by the scenery in the painting, I invited you and your Calico cat into the painting out of impulse. Therefore, when I returned the painting to you today, it was sincere both in deed and in heart, with no pretense. Her expression was calm, her gaze indifferent. Thank you, the Taoist replied, also standing. The woman deeply bowed again, then raised her head to ask, May I come to visit you again in the future? Of course, the Taoist said. This woman was also a master. Not just in terms of her cultivation skills, but her extraordinary Qin skills deserved the title of a world-class master. Whenever Song Yu arrived at a place, he would always visit such masters, and there was no reason to turn them away. Then thank you, Taoist master. If you ever wish to listen to the Qin, feel free to find me at Xianxia Pavilion, the woman said. The so-called fee is merely a way for the princess to select influential figures. I am just a mountain creature who has become a demon, seeking only cultivation and freedom. There is no benefit to me from such things. If you wish to come, just look for me directly. The maid beside her also smiled and added, You can look for me as well. Song Yu looked at her and her maid, a smile appearing on his face as he asked, Do you and your tail have separate thoughts, or are you multitasking? The woman paused for a moment, then quickly bowed. I've embarrassed myself. It's fine. Then I shall take my leave. The woman turned to leave, and her maid glanced back at him with a smile before following her out, both of them boarding the carriage. With the sound of the carriage wheels fading, the Taoist finally shifted his gaze away. This woman appeared weak and delicate. Her beautiful exterior easily evoked a sense of pity, and those who played the Qin often gave off an impression of being gentle and uninterested in conflict. However, on that day, with the clarity brought by the Kingaming festival, it became evident this was clearly a great demon. He wouldn't claim to be precise in guessing her cultivation level, but judging by his intuition, she was probably no less than the swallow immortal from Anking or the snake immortal from Mount Bacon. She was truly the most powerful great demon he had encountered in his life. Nine-tailed fox, the Taoist inexplicably thought of this term. It was certain that the woman was a fox, but whether she was a nine-tailed one was unclear. Legends claimed that nine-tailed foxes were top-tier auspicious beasts with abilities comparable to inherent gods, though it was uncertain whether that was true. A faint sound came from the staircase. The Taoist turned to look and saw a calico cat peeking at him from the middle of the staircase, its eyes bright as amber. "I'm done writing, Taoist." "Impressive." The Taoist immediately set aside his distractions and focused on the calico cat, asking, "Have you been writing the whole time?" "I only wrote for a little while. The rest of the time I was playing," the calico cat replied without hesitation. "Indeed, you are exceptionally talented. There's no need to write many times. Just a little practice is enough for you to create something great. In this life, I admire such extraordinarily gifted individuals the most." "Admire the most?" "Yes. What's on your table?" "A painting." The Taoist called for the calico cat to come and take a look. "Lady Calico, come over and see." The calico cat didn't respond, but immediately stepped down the stairs. Before reaching the bottom, it darted through the railing and jumped down to the ground. It took 2 or 3 steps onto the stool, leaning over to inspect the painting. Its eyes were filled with curiosity and contemplation. "It's a painting." "Yes, what do you think of it?" "I don't know." "Take another look. It seems a bit familiar." "Don't you remember? This is Mount Chang, where we went in spring." "I remember now," the calico cat replied without a second thought. "What do you see in this painting?" The Taoist pointed at the silhouette of a person and a cat in the painting. "What is this?" "A person and a cat." "Take another look. This looks like a Taoist priest." "And then?" "That person seems to be wearing the same clothes as you," the calico cat said, turning its head to glance at the Taoist. "Not the one you're wearing today. Why don't you wear the same outfit every day?" "That's my fault." "Hem. Can't you see it?" "I see it." "What did you see?" "I don't know." "This Taoist is me." "Huh?" The calico cat was suddenly taken aback. "Then who is the cat beside you?" The Taoist couldn't help but feel helpless, unsure whether to call her clever or foolish. Perhaps cats and humans thought differently. In some ways, their thoughts diverged, and what was considered smart or foolish was naturally different too. "Of course it's you." The cat turned its head, staring blankly at the Taoist. "You came with me to stroll around Mount Chang that day, and someone saw us and painted it, so both you and I are in this painting." Songyu paused for a moment, revealing a faint smile. "Speaking of which, this is our first time appearing together in a painting." "Me and you?" The cat redirected its gaze back to the painting, seemingly examining it more carefully than before. "Yes." The Taoist also looked down at it, finding himself liking it more the longer he stared. He smiled and asked, "So how do you feel about this painting now?" "It's excellent, of course," the calico cat replied softly while continuing to look at it. "Was that person just now here to deliver the painting to us?" "Pretty much." "Then we should thank her a lot." "Since you say so, I'll thank her." "Exactly. You can already make decisions." "I can already make decisions." "Yeah. Let's hang this up on the wall." "Since you say, I'll do it." "Exactly." The cat still stood on the table, seriously examining the painting. Now that Lady Calico mentioned it, this painting was indeed excellent. He had to admit, the more he looked at it, the more it resembled them. "Let's go, Lady Calico." "Where to?" "To buy a hook." Since Lady Calico had already made the decision, the Taoist dared not delay. Taking advantage of the time before it became the hottest part of the day, he promptly took her out to buy a hook. When they returned, he asked Lady Calico where to hang it, and she casually pointed to a spot. The Taoist then pressed the hook into the wooden wall with ease and hung the painting up. In the room, there were now 2 paintings. One was a large horizontal painting, depicting mountains and waters as if it was an immortal's realm. It was full of spirit chi and vibrancy, lifelike and captivating. The other was a vertical hanging scroll, showing only a corner of the mountains. Yet it captured the gentle spring sunlight, with the Taoist and his cat companion standing side by side in harmony with nature. Although the technique wasn't as great as the first, it was still a good painting. The room had no unnecessary decorations, just these 2 paintings. However, they complemented the simple furniture and the cool bedding on the bed, adding a touch of elegance to the humble space. The Taoist stood in the room, facing these 2 paintings for a long time, and feeling much more relaxed. At this moment, there was nothing else he needed to think about. Feeling tired from watching the paintings, he decided to take a nap. \\\\. After the nap, the Taoist sat down at the desk. He then spread out some paper, dipped his brush in ink, and began to record the recent events one by one. Having studied the Mount Chang painting for half a month, He had gained considerable insight. However, most of it was an intangible understanding of the heavenly Tao and the laws of the world, mysterious and profound. It was impossible to articulate or write down, so he merely noted a few phrases. The Annal Pavilion's reputation was well-deserved. Interestingly, the tea house had been passed down in Xianxia for over 100 years, spanning 4 generations. Perhaps these 4 generations were all one and the same. The fact that the demons had hidden so deeply in Xianxia and lived for so long was truly intriguing. When he began writing about the events of that noon, the Taoist paused. It appeared as if a powerful demon with profound cultivation and unmatched mastery of the Qin was hiding in the capital to repay a great favor and trapped there as a result. However, behind it lay the current power struggle faced by the empire. Speaking of this, he thought of Princess Changping. This princess, although a woman, should not be underestimated. She was likely the most powerful and wealthiest princess in the history of the Central Plains dynasty. As for why this was so, it was a long story. It began with the previous empress. The Great Yan dynasty once had an empress whose accomplishments need not be discussed in detail, but her emergence had a tremendous impact on this world, most notably in the elevation of women's status. In feudal times, women's status was generally low. For various reasons, this world was slightly better than in previous eras, but there were still distinctions over the millennia. During the reign of this empress, women's status reached its peak. Although it still paled in comparison to that of men, women could engage in commerce and even participate in politics, with female officials present in both the court and the palace. Even now, the status of women in Great Yan was higher than in any previous dynasty, an influence that has lasted for over a century. Moreover, and perhaps more importantly, the existence of this empress ignited political ambitions in many women. Since the time of the empress, there had been several generations of women who have frequently interfered in politics or even attempted to seize power, be they empresses, dowager empresses, or princesses, far more actively than in previous dynasties. This was exemplified by Princess Changping, who demonstrated remarkable political abilities even in her youth. There were even more reasons to consider. The Great Yan Emperor had poor fertility, with very few offspring, which undeniably posed significant challenges to the stability of the Great Yan. Although the previous emperor was known for his benevolence and kindness, garnering widespread praise, his lineage was quite unstable. He fathered 3 sons in total. One died shortly after birth, another drowned as a child after falling into a well, and the third, despite growing up successfully, had poor health and died even earlier than his father. This situation created issues regarding the succession of the throne. At that time, there was much debate among the court and the royal family. They proposed various solutions, while the emperor himself remained indecisive. As a result, chaos ensued throughout the land. Ultimately, through the joint efforts of the current emperor and Princess Changping, the previous emperor and the court chose the previous emperor's younger brother, who was the current emperor, to inherit the throne. At that time, the emperor was only in his 30s, and Princess Changping was not yet 20. Later, the emperor did not mistreat Princess Changping and granted her considerable power. This emperor was more ambitious than his elder brother, with a stronger disposition, eager to expand territory. As a result, he devoted less energy to governing the country, and before the arrival of the state preceptor, it was Princess Changping who filled those gaps. The problem still lay with the heirs. When the emperor first ascended the throne, although the crown prince wasn't as shrewd as his older sister, there was at least a prince. However, within 2 years, the only prince also died of illness. The princess's heart burned with ambition. Amid the turmoil in the court, some began to side with her. Later, this emperor fathered 2 more princes in succession, finally getting more children in his old age. The emperor himself remained robust, having ruled for over 30 years. Now approaching 70, he still appeared remarkably healthy. The 2 princes gradually grew up. But how could the now impassioned princess and the ministers who had aligned with her be content? This was, in fact, a struggle for power in the current dynasty. A nearly 50-year-old princess, with accomplishments that supported the throne, had been navigating the court for years. The 2 princes were still only in their teens, alongside an aging emperor approaching 70. Regardless, it would surely become a significant event in history. The Taoist understood the vastness of the world and the brevity of life. It was not easy to see everything in the world within 20 years, and the time spent in changing would not be long. This historical drama of succession disputes often took years, even decades, to unfold. He hadn't deliberately focused on these matters, yet unexpectedly, he gained insights from different angles and in various ways. This feeling was entirely different from how future generations read history or how contemporary people learned about it from books or storytellers. Being in this era and amidst a conflict zone, even without intervention for various reasons, one would still be affected by it and feel its presence. Such major events were intimately connected to every person in the world. It was akin to the chaos caused by demons in Changing, the period of curfews, the political orders arising from official transfers and power struggles, or the powerful demon that came knocking today. It was only by being in this era and this place that one could truly feel the authenticity of history. Countless storms of blood and carnage had surely passed. The Taoist was merely a traveler. Even the past grandmasters of Hidden Dragon Temple were the same. Unless a clear outcome promised a favorable direction, it was better not to intervene, allowing history to make its own correct choices while he merely walked through it and served as a witness. At most, they might jot down some notes, and perhaps years later, future generations would seek the truth of history from the words they wrote. The Taoist shook his head with a sigh and continued writing. Beside him, a cat sat upright with its tail wrapped around its little feet, tilting its head to watch him write. The Taoist looked back at her helplessly. In the past, when this cat couldn't read, it often played with the hanging strings of his brush while he recounted his travels and experiences. Now that it could recognize words, it no longer played with the strings. But its current curious posture, tilting its head to focus on what he was writing, felt like an even greater distraction. "What are you looking at?" Noticing his gaze, the cat met his eyes and even asked him in return. "Nothing," Songyu withdrew his gaze. "Then why are you looking at me? Why aren't you writing? How many words can you read?" "I can read some, but not everything. When you recognize more characters, you won't be able to watch me write these anymore." "Why?" The cat's eyes glimmered intensely as it stared at him. "Because this is a travelogue." "Why? What do you mean, why?" The Calico cat looked him up and down, her expression serious. After a long pause, it finally said, "You're not smart." After saying this, she turned around and jumped off the table, running off to play with her cloth ball. The Taoist shook his head and continued writing. Wooden planks upstairs were quite old, not only peeling and fading but also uneven. When the cat didn't deliberately tread lightly, her running was already noisy. When she played with her ball, she would run quickly and with great force, often causing the wooden floor to creak and shift. However, the cat didn't mind, and it didn't disturb the Taoist. It seemed both parties had long since grown accustomed to it. As he wrote, the Taoist asked, "Do you know what day it is today?" "What day?" the cat replied while playing. "It's the Xiaoshu." "Xiaoshu." The cat stopped, turned her head to look at him, her face full of confusion. "The shu means heat. Doesn't shu also mean mouse?" "Yes. Little mouse. After Xiaoshu comes dashu." "Great mouse." The cat's interest peaked as she fixed her gaze on him. "After dashu comes the beginning of autumn." "Beginning of autumn?" The Calico cat became thoroughly interested, no longer caring about the ball on the ground. It instead sat upright, staring directly at him. The Taoist felt he had said enough and fell silent. The cat wasn't in a hurry, so she continued to watch him from behind. Days went by. The period following Xiaoshu marked the hottest time in Changing, where the heat was often unbearable, and sometimes it was so stuffy it was difficult to bear. Fortunately, the bamboo mat was cool, with no other drawbacks apart from the occasional itch from the fur. However, since Lady Calico could endure it with her full coat of fur, the Taoist naturally could as well. Occasionally, when a cool breeze would rise, the Taoist would open the windows of the small building to let the breeze in. Lying on the bamboo mat and feeling the cool wind was the most wonderful part of summer. In the afternoons, the streets were so sun-soaked that people were reluctant to come out, and shops had no business. The world fell into a moment of silence, leaving only the sound of cicadas. During the 3 hottest periods in the summer, even midnight was cool. With the windows open, a breeze flowed in. In the center of the room stood a ceramic pot filled with fire wicks made by the neighbor next door. When lit, they didn't produce an open flame but burned very slowly, emitting no sparks and giving off a herbal fragrance. The Taoist lay on the cool mat, which should have felt refreshing, but unfortunately, he had a Calico cat laying on him. Ever since returning from Mount Bacon, Lady Calico's mouse-catching business had thrived again. However, to ensure sustainable mouse-catching while balancing study and rest, the Taoist had agreed with her to continue the previous arrangement, catching the mice from each household over 5 days, taking a 2-day break after finishing with one household, and requesting leave when necessary. Today was a scheduled day off, but the cat couldn't fully relax. First, it needed to devote more time to studying to maintain its facade of being a gifted cat. Additionally, today marked Dashu, with the yang energy at its peak during the day. At night, both the moon and the yin-qi were abundant. Lady Calico cultivated her yin-yang spiritual energy, working hard during both day and night to absorb the essence of the sun and moon. As midnight approached, she felt exhausted and not very energetic after finishing her training. However, having been on night duty for quite some time, the Calico cat hadn't really slept well for a long while. It wandered around the room and climbed on and off the bed, changing positions and locations repeatedly, until finally settling on the Taoist's belly and drifting off to sleep. At this moment, it curled up into a ball, sleeping soundly. The fire wick kept mosquitoes at bay and helped it relax, allowing the cat to dream. The dream was quite simple. It was early autumn. In a small town at the foot of the mountains, a stone arch bridge spanned a gently flowing river, with dark willows swaying. It sat at the bridgehead, staring into the distance with confusion. In its line of sight, a young Taoist wearing a robe that was not as worn as it was now approached respectfully. He had begged 2 small fish from an old fisherman, threaded them onto a willow branch, and brought them back as a betrothal gift for it. The Calico cat stared at him. At that moment, it felt itself being embraced by someone and suddenly lifted off the ground. Then she was set back down. The ground was icy and cool, just like the mat. The mat. The small town, the stone bridge, the morning mist, everything vanished. The willows, the fish, everything seemed to fade into darkness. Even it and the Taoist were gone. Drowsily opening its eyes, it rubbed them with its paw. It found itself curled up on the mat, surrounded by darkness. In the dim light, the Taoist was getting out of bed and heading downstairs. The Calico cat rubbed its eyes again. So it was just a dream. It must have been sleeping on his belly, and when he got up, he simply moved it aside. As it pondered this, the Taoist had already walked away. The Calico cat groggily climbed to its feet. \\\\*. The Taoist made his way downstairs in the dark. Moonlight streamed through the window, making it not too dark. As soon as he reached the bottom of the stairs, he sensed something was off. Turning around to take a look, he saw a groggy Calico cat was following him down the stairs, its steps unsteady and clearly lacking energy. The Taoist paused, and it stopped as well. He looked at it, and it looked up at him. "What are you doing, Lady Calico?" "What are you doing, Taoist master?" "I'm just going to the toilet." "Oh? Why are you following me, Lady Calico?" "Just hurry up." The Calico cat could barely open its eyes and spoke in a sleepy tone, trying to encourage him. "I'm going back to sleep." The Taoist seemed speechless. After finishing up in the toilet, he turned to head back. The cat, however, seemed completely oblivious to his frustration. It followed him back while feeling drowsy and continued to chat with him. "Taoist master. Is today the beginning of autumn?" "Today is the Dashu." "How long until the beginning of autumn then?" "I mentioned to you before that there are still 30 days left, and you know how long that is." His voice was gentle. "Oh," the Calico cat then fell silent. As a genius cat, Lady Calico knew exactly how long 30 days was. However, just because it knew didn't mean it wouldn't ask. It lay down on the bed. The bamboo mat felt pleasantly cool, and the pillow filled with rice husks made a soft rustling sound. It wasn't exactly soft, but it felt quite comfortable. The Calico cat didn't crawl onto his belly this time, but instead settled beside him, staring intently as she said, "Taoist master. It seems I just had a dream." "What did you dream about?" The Calico cat tilted her head to look at him, her eyes wide open and round in the dark, but she wouldn't speak. The Taoist turned his head to give her a puzzled glance. In the deep of night, with only a sliver of moonlight streaming in through the window, he could barely make out its dark shape. But it still didn't respond, merely locking eyes with him. "Do you not want to talk about it, Lady Calico?" "I want to talk." "Then go ahead." "I don't want to." "Then don't." "Let's sleep." "How about we explore the painting tomorrow?" "Which painting?" "Which other painting could it be?" "Let's go into the painting." "I've always wanted to go in and take a look." "Oh." "Let's sleep." The Taoist turned over and closed his eyes. The cat kept its eyes wide open in the dark, sparkling and round. For a cat, enduring a long night was quite ordinary. Next morning, the Taoist cooked a bowl of porridge and 2 eggs. The Calico cat was a great egg partner as she loved the egg yolk. This made her the perfect match for Xianxia, who preferred the egg whites but didn't like the yolks. They shared the eggs, and everyone was happy. After finishing breakfast and cleaning up the bowls and pots, the Taoist took the cat to the 2nd floor, standing in front of the painting. The painting in front of them hadn't changed much from before. The nearby reed grass, resembling a carpet, was interrupted by a small path leading toward the distant, sky-high Mount Kang. At the foot of the mountain, a village could be seen with curling smoke. There were many patches of farmland at the junction of the village and the reeds, laid out in a grid pattern like a chessboard with varying shades of green and yellow, though there were already some changes since the first sight. The more significant changes were the wild geese in the sky and the blue cattle on the ground. It seemed that the content of the painting updated every time it was closed and reopened, and it also changed at dusk each day when no one was watching. When someone was looking, however, it would not change. Notably, there was a calligraphy piece hanging at the top of the painting. The writing wasn't particularly good, but was fairly neat. It read, "Thieves will lose control of their arm for a year." Recently, there had been several visits from jianghu bandits. In the city, they didn't dare to gather and cause trouble. If the imperial guards came, no one could escape. They also didn't dare to confront the Taoist directly, often visiting when he went out or in the dead of night. However, the Taoist had placed multiple restrictions and spells on the painting, and had even asked the Calico cat to write a reminder for any thieves who might try to steal it. If they disregarded the warning and touched it without permission, not only would they be unable to take the painting or harm the paper, but their arms would also go numb and unresponsive. As a result, many bandits who came would hastily flee, stumbling when they jumped out the window. In recent days, fewer people had come to visit. The Taoist stared at the painting in a daze. Even after all this time, its spiritual resonance and mysteries still amazed him. He couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to step inside. "Let's go. Let's go." After the Taoist said one sentence, the cat echoed it. Without using a brush, the Taoist simply reached out and lightly tapped the painting. Mysterious connections formed, and the spiritual resonance surged. The painting rippled as if it were no longer just an image but had transformed into a door, a window. "Ladies first, Lady Calico." "Do I jump in?" "Mem, you go first." "All right, I'll go first." "No, I go first." The Taoist looked down at the cat, likely aware of her thoughts. "Then we'll go together." With that, Songyu bent down gently and picked her up. He said nothing more, took a step forward, and transformed into a wisp of blue smoke before entering the painting. As the scenery shifted, the seasons changed. In a daze, the Taoist holding the cat found himself on the little path in the painting, surrounded by reeds taller than a person. Their white tassels were swaying in the wind, all bending in the same direction. The breeze carried the scents of earth and reeds, faintly infused with a hint of moisture. The Taoist's first thought was, how cooling. While Changing was experiencing the scorching summer, this place felt like deep autumn. Suddenly transitioning from the sweltering heat to this refreshing environment felt like stepping into an air-conditioned room on a hot summer day. The breeze blew refreshingly. The cat in the Taoist's arms had already opened her eyes wide, looking left and right. The Taoist bent down to place her on the ground, casually pinching some soil from the earth. He brought it to his eyes, rubbing it between his fingers and examining it closely. After a moment, he returned the soil to the wind, then reached out to grasp a reed leaf that had been bent over by the breeze. He was still pinching it between two fingers to feel its texture, the leaf's coolness, its moisture, and the serrated edges. The Taoist appeared to be deep in thought. Then, without hesitation, he turned to see what lay behind this painting, hidden from view. But it was not empty. Instead, it was a lake, surrounded by a protective barrier. The lake was vast, and with the fine weather, one could see the opposite shore, where there were clusters of towering mountains, likely a few li away. Near the shore of the lake, many reeds grew, and the water cypress trees flourishing in this season were ablaze with red, reflecting beautifully in the water, half blue and half red against the sky. Gentle ripples danced across the surface, occasionally disturbed by the movement of fish and shrimp, creating circles of disturbance. Numerous water birds soared through the air, gliding on the surface of the water. They dove in to catch prey and occasionally called out. This was no mere painted world. It was clearly a real world. The Taoist withdrew his gaze and looked up toward the distant blue mountains, resembling a towering wall. The village at the foot of the mountain could be faintly seen. The Taoist immediately set off in that direction. Seeing this, the cat hurried to follow. From outside the painting, the wall-like, rolling green mountains didn't seem far. Now that he was among them, it still didn't feel distant. He could only tell from experience that it was their immense size and the flatness of the land that made it seem so. The Taoist was very patient, walking slowly. As he walked, he paid close attention to this world. Whether it was the wind blowing, the path beneath his feet, the reeds and other wild grasses around him, the small animals occasionally darting through the grass, the birds flying in the sky, or the changes in the world, he observed and recorded everything meticulously. The profound essence of the universe, the seasonal differences unique to this place compared to the outside world, all were captured in his understanding. Chapter 181, The World Within the Painting. The Taoist walked intermittently, his pace slow. The cat, on the other hand, took cheerful little steps. It also moved forward and stopped frequently. It often scampered ahead, then fell back again. If it lagged behind a bit, once the Taoist had gone far, it would stretch its neck to look for him. If it couldn't see him, it would hurry to catch up. If it reached in front of him, it would often stop and glance back. Seeing he hadn't caught up, it would have to wait. "Taoist master," the cat called out as it waited for the Taoist to catch up, lifting its head high, following the water birds flying overhead with its gaze while shouting at him. Are we going to find Sir Du?" "Lady Calico, you're quite clever. I admire you," the Taoist said patiently, still immersed in the world of the painting. "But where is he?" "That's a good question." The Taoist shifted his gaze from the sky down to the towering mountains ahead. The mountains were magnificent, their bases far away. From the size visible in the painting, they stretched at least several dozen li from left to right. Now, looking again, his gaze seemed not limited to the painting. It could extend beyond it, just like when he had first entered the painting and had been able to see a lake that wasn't there before. Now, when looking north and south, there were towering mountains absent from the painting. He wondered if it was possible to walk out, and if so, where would it lead? In any case, within the painted area, the mountains stretched dozens of li at their base with scattered villages of varying heights, housing tens of thousands of people. How could one know where Master Du lived? "If we can't find him, then so be it," the Taoist said to the cat. "Oh," the cat didn't seem to mind much, shaking its head and trotting ahead to chase after some bugs. Song Yu raised his hand, letting his fingers glide over the clusters of reed tassels as he walked. Finally, they reached the end. Ahead lay vast fields of fertile soil. The farmland extended from the edge of the reeds all the way to the foot of the distant mountains. The fields and dirt looked like a chessboard, with ridges and small paths crisscrossing, and occasionally someone could be seen walking on them. It seemed there really were people. The Taoist did not quicken his pace, moving steadily along the path. It wasn't until he encountered an old man herding a cow back that he gave a polite greeting, "Old sir." The old man turned upon hearing the voice, surprised to see a Taoist in a robe. "A Taoist master, you seem unfamiliar." "I am new to this place, so it's natural I appear unfamiliar." Upon hearing this, the old man looked ahead at the towering mountains, then redirected his gaze to the Taoist. "Is this your first time descending the mountain? But I often go up the mountain. How come I haven't seen you before?" Song Yu followed the old man's gaze. It sounded like there was indeed a Taoist temple on that mountain, and it seemed that this was the only Taoist temple around. "I came from outside to visit an old friend." From outside, the old man was instantly taken aback, his eyes widening as he stared at him. "Indeed," the Taoist answered truthfully. The old man's sunken eyes fixed on him, then glanced at the cat beside him before he asked, "How did you get in? Where did you come in from? Is it rare for outsiders to come here? This is a place beyond the world. How could outsiders come in?" "It's quite a coincidence, really." Seeing that he was quite old and was very surprised, and fearing that he might become too agitated, he could only bow and say, "My surname is Song, and my name is Yu. I cultivate in Yizhu and am certainly not a bad person. I find it quite astonishing to be here and would like to ask you, old sir, about the situation in this place." "Ah," the old man gasped. It was indeed a rare occurrence for outsiders to arrive, and seeing the Taoist's calm demeanor and appropriate manner of speaking made him feel that he was not an ordinary person, likely a high-level cultivator. The old man's tone turned more respectful. "Where do you intend to go?" "I'm not quite sure for now." "Then please, Taoist master, come with me. We can talk as we walk. It would be a pleasure to host you," the old man said, gesturing for him to follow while holding onto the cow's rope. "How could I trouble you, old sir?" "Why not, come. Then don't mind if I do." The Taoist didn't dare refuse and bowed again. He then followed the old man while asking, "I'm quite astonished to find myself here. May I ask what kind of place this is?" "It doesn't have a name." "What about this mountain?" "We simply call it Mount Kang." "How many villages are there at the foot of the mountain?" "There are probably dozens, big and small. I live in a small village to the north. Just keep walking straight ahead." "Since you say this is a place beyond the world, I wonder when you all arrived here. Have you lived here for generations?" "According to the old folks, they came here in the early years of the Great Yan dynasty. At that time there were only houses, but no one lived here," the old man said, leading the green cow along, stooping as he walked. They said it was to escape some war or tax. Later, we settled down here. It seemed they were quite unfamiliar with wars and taxes. Have there been outsiders in recent years? I've heard of a few instances where outsiders came, the old man replied. I remember 2 times. Once when I was still young, dozens of people came in from outside, and they seem to be living over in Nyinger village now. The other time was when I was younger. I heard about over 100 people coming in, and they seemed to be living at the southernmost point. Is that so? The Taoist nodded. It appeared that the people here weren't just conjured out of thin air, but were descendants of the Du family, who had been brought in from outside for various reasons over the generations. These outsiders came to escape disasters, whether from wars or other troubles. When asked how they got in, they couldn't answer. We are hospitable people, and since there's plenty of space here, we welcome them and help them settle down, the old man said. From them, we can learn a lot about what's happening outside. Life outside must not be as good as it is here. Indeed, I've heard that outside, people have to give their harvested grain to others and have to fight with knives and swords, risking their lives. The old man shook his head. He paused, then continued. But while this place is nice, I've also heard it's very different from the outside. How is it different? Songyu quickly cupped his hands in greeting. I would appreciate your guidance, old sir. Here, every year is the same. There are no hot or cold days, and it's all daytime with no night. I've heard that outside it gets dark every day. Is that true? Indeed. Then when it gets dark, you can't go out to farm, right? Generally, when it gets dark, we go to sleep. Does everyone sleep at the same time? Yes, the Taoist answered calmly, as if not surprised at all. Is that true? Seems it's not like that here. We sleep when we want and wake when we want. In some places, they have to strike bells or drums. When the drums beat, we sleep, and when the bells ring, we wake. We just pull up the curtains. The old man seemed quite astonished by what Songyu said, but the other outsiders who came here said the same. What about the crops? The crops are still planted and grow very quickly, but they can only be grown in those fields over there. If planted elsewhere, they won't grow, and they definitely can't be planted in the reed fields behind. Why can't they be planted in the reed fields? The reeds over there are enchanted. They only grow that way, neither more nor less. They don't turn green, and they can't be cut down, let alone used for planting anything. I see. It's quite strange, the old man chuckled. Some say this is a divine immortal's garden, and others say we live within a painting. Heh heh, how could there possibly be a divine immortal? Indeed, the Taoist nodded with a smile and then asked, is it possible to walk out of here? You can't walk out, it's 81 li from this side to that side, the old man replied, pointing first to the right and then to the front. The furthest you can go behind is to the lakeside, but you can't go into the lake. The furthest you can go in front is to climb to the top of that mountain, but you can't cross over. I've heard it's 18 li long. Do you have to live here? Not necessarily. Why not necessarily? I've heard that sometimes people manage to walk across, but I don't know why. They just walk over and then disappear, never to return. The old man shook his head as he spoke. No one knows where they went. No wonder there's a fence by the lake. Exactly. As the old man spoke, he sized up the young Taoist. He noticed that no matter how he described things, this Taoist, who claimed to come from the outside world, remained calm and composed, seemingly unfazed. In contrast, he himself, having heard about the outside world, was genuinely surprised by the stories the Taoist told. The difference between them was quite stark. The old man became even more certain of his earlier suspicions. Thus, he spoke freely and exhaustively. The Taoist began to understand this place a bit better. Here there was only late autumn, no 4 seasons, only daytime, no nighttime. The east-west distance was 18 li, and the north-south distance was 81 li. It wasn't small, but it couldn't be considered vast either, and the population was far from saturated. There seemed to be a barrier at the edges that couldn't be crossed, yet occasionally someone could slip through, though no one knew where they went. As they chatted and walked, they approached the village. Looking around, one could see neatly arranged houses, with beautiful ponds and mulberry trees, and the sounds of chickens crowing and dogs barking filled the air. Some people were tilling the fields, some were carrying baskets to pick vegetables, others were holding bowls to eat, while some had just woken up. Each person seemed to be enjoying themselves, with very few showing signs of sorrow. The old man was dressed in work clothes, which didn't stand out much. However, upon entering the village, the Taoist noticed that the clothing of the young men and women, while generally similar to what was found in the outside world, had subtle differences. For instance, the trendy accessories that had become popular in recent years in the outside world were nowhere to be seen here. As the Taoist walked and observed, He asked the old man beside him if anyone had come in recently, but the old man shook his head, indicating he didn't know. The Taoist had initially intended to look for Sir Du, but given the vastness of the area, finding someone proved difficult. The old man, being very hospitable, invited him to his home as a guest. The Taoist hesitated for a moment, but didn't want to decline too forcefully, so he accepted the invitation and followed him to his home. The old man's family consisted of 7 members. Upon hearing that the Taoist had come from the outside world, they were very warm and welcoming. They prepared a feast of wine and chicken to entertain him, and even offered him a place to stay for the night. Everyone engaged him in casual conversation, asking about the affairs of the outside world. They were constantly amazed whenever they heard about the differences, as if they could hardly imagine a world like that of the outside. Chapter 182, Reunion with Sir Du. In addition to providing delicious food and drink, the old man prepared a room for Xianxia and the cat to stay in. The Taoist thanked him respectfully and settled in. Indeed, there was no day or night here. From the beginning until now, it had been dusk. By this time, most of the old man's family had gone to sleep, and it was nearly time for the Taoist to rest as well. However, sitting by the window and gazing at the scenery outside during dusk made it difficult for him to fall asleep. This feeling was quite interesting. In the past, while in the outside world, he could sense the cycle of seasons and the alternation of yin and yang, but he didn't perceive it so clearly. It was like air. One is constantly breathing and can be acutely aware of its existence, but when placed in a place without air, one would inevitably gain a new understanding of its presence. Time gradually passed. The cat ran a few laps around the room before finally lying down on the bed, half closing its eyes, ready to sleep. The Taoist, on the other hand, sat cross-legged. He was calming his mind to perceive the spiritual resonance of the world and experience the mysteries of this realm. After nearly a whole day of deep conversation, his understanding of this world had significantly increased. Not only did he learn from others, but he also gained insights from his own experiences within it. This world was both somewhat similar to and vastly different from the outside. It relied on the outside world for existence yet was isolated, forming its own unique realm with very different rules. Xianxia had many points of confusion, but the most perplexing aspect was its existence within a painting. And regardless of the perplexities, since it truly existed, there must be great mysteries within. By calming his mind and contemplating, he could achieve profound insights. To put it simply, the so-called mastery of skills, whether in sculpture, painting, or musical talent, when taken to the extreme, was not about connecting with deities or spirits, but rather about understanding this world itself. His acquaintance with Sir Du was destined to yield great rewards. \\\\*. Here, there was no alternation of day and night, no seasonal changes, and the world was different from the outside. Even Xianxia could not perceive the passage of time. He only knew that the cat had fallen asleep and then woken up again. It had come close to him several times and walked on his legs before returning, but its sleep had never been regular, so he couldn't deduce how long it had been. If he were outside, it would have likely been an entire night. There was some commotion outside, and his legs felt slightly itchy. The Taoist opened his eyes and immediately looked down. The cat had also sensed the noise outside and was standing at the bedside, stretching its neck to look out the window. However, even when she stretched her neck as far as possible, it was still not high enough. Standing up like a person seemed too troublesome. So, it placed its 2 front paws on the Taoist's thigh to raise her upper body, bringing her line of sight level with the window as it peered outside at the noisy crowd. Taoist master, you're awake." The cat turned its head to look at him, its paws still on his leg. If he weren't wearing pants, moving its paws would surely leave marks on his thigh. "I'm awake. There are people outside." "Yeah." Voices from outside had already drifted into the room. These were other villagers, and even some from neighboring villages, who had heard that someone from the outside had come. They were very surprised, eager to witness the novelty and broaden their horizons. The old man's family had just woken up, claiming that their guest was still sleeping and keeping the visitors outside. The Taoist exchanged glances with the cat, stood up, and pushed the door open. The Taoist master is awake. "Hello, everyone. Is the Taoist really from the outside?" "Indeed. What's it like outside now?" As expected, another round of questioning began. The Taoist patiently answered their questions one by one. As he answered, new visitors kept arriving. Thus, he had to answer the same questions many times. In the morning, someone invited him for a meal, and at noon, another invitation came. The villagers were very enthusiastic, all eager to invite the Taoist to their homes for a feast of chicken and goose, with good wine and food. After 2 or 3 days, people from faraway places had heard about this Taoist from the outside world and came specifically to visit. Some of them were even individuals who had come from the outside before. In the old man's memory, the last time someone from the outside had entered was during his youth. Even now, the young person who had come in back then had not yet passed away. Upon seeing the Taoist, they asked even more detailed questions. Sometimes, when they talked about things present in the outside world but absent here, or discussed the changes and vicissitudes of the outside world, they expressed deep sentiments. Yet, no one was willing to venture out. This continued for several days. Almost every day, someone invited the Taoist to visit, generously offering food, be it fish or meat, treating him at every household, showcasing their simple and honest customs. On the 4th or 5th day, after waking from a good sleep, the host informed him that yet another visitor had come. The Taoist stepped outside and saw a middle-aged man. "Immortal master," the middle-aged man exclaimed softly, glancing around. Then, regaining his composure, he greeted the Taoist, saying, "I've heard that you have come from the outside. May I have the honor of inviting you to my humble home for a chat?" Song Yu smiled in response. He then turned to thank the host for the hospitality and called the cat, following the middle-aged man away. They gradually left the village. "Immortal master." Only then did Sir Du pay his respects. "Sir, you need not be so courteous. I am quite unworthy of such kindness," the Taoist said as they walked. "That day I was in a hurry and forgot to inform you of my address. That was truly inexcusable, and I must apologize," Sir Du replied, bowing again. "Don't mention it, sir," the Taoist chuckled. "Since arriving here, I have been touched by the simple and honest customs of this place. The villagers are all so warm and welcoming. I have been treated to meals for several days now. Such experiences are rare in the outside world. Moreover, this place is rich in spiritual resonance and profound mysteries. Since coming here, I have gained much insight and knowledge. I should be thanking you, sir. I wonder how long you have been here." "About a few days." "Ah, I am so forgetful." "Please don't say that," the Taoist replied, not wishing to engage in too much politeness. He shifted the topic. "May I ask where you reside?" "All the people here are connected to the Du family's ancestors. I only occasionally come to visit my wife. Most of the time I am outside, which is quite inconvenient. Thus, I have taken the name Kuk Shuan and live alone at the foot of the mountain ahead. It's just below the Tian Temple on Mount Kang, quite far from the surrounding villages," Sir Du explained. He continued, "Today, I went out to buy supplies and heard people talking about your arrival, so I came to invite you." "Sir, you truly need not have gone to such trouble," Song Yu replied. "I came in search of you, not for anything specific. I have been admiring this painting at home, gaining insights from its spiritual resonance and mysteries over the past few days. Out of curiosity about what the painting depicts, I entered rather abruptly and did not expect to disturb you, Sir Du." "Not at all, not at all." Sir Du quickly waved his hand, leading the way as they walked and spoke. "Have you been to the lake?" "No, I haven't." "That's good." "Why is that?" "I was afraid you might accidentally wander out." "I heard that someone has walked out before." "Indeed." Sir Du explained to him, "The painted world within the painting represents the outside world. Though it forms its own realm and is isolated from the outside, it is still connected to it. There is an invisible wall separating the two, yet people often accidentally walk out. If there's a barrier, why do some people occasionally manage to walk out?" "Ah, that is something you may not know," Sir Du replied. "Long ago, our ancestors painted their hometown at dusk. While the world in the painting is frozen at that time, the outside world continues to change. For an ordinary person standing at the edge, the painted world will always be at dusk, while the outside could be any time of day, making it impossible to step out. However, if an ordinary person happens to reach the edge when the outside world coincidentally matches the moment painted by our ancestors, they could walk out." "How marvelous." "This is a secret, so I ask that you—" "I understand," the Taoist nodded, then asked, "But if one were to walk out, where would they go?" "Ah, that we cannot know," Sir Du said. "Perhaps they vanish without a trace, or perhaps they find themselves in the outside world. But very few have managed to walk out. The outside world is vast and boundless, and wherever a person ends up, it is like a drop in the ocean. No news of them has ever reached us." "Is that so?" The Taoist found it increasingly intriguing. Following Sir Du, they strolled along, chatting casually. They passed through several villages, changing paths a few times, until they reached the foot of Mount Kang. Sir Du pointed to a few small houses visible in the distance and said to the Taoist, "That is where we're headed." A small path led through the woods. In front of the house, there were chickens and ducks, along with a dog. Only Sir Du and his wife lived there, and the nearest village and residents were about 2 li away. After you, immortal master, Sir Du respectfully invited him inside. Inside the house hung 3 paintings. One depicted an armored general accompanied by 2 archers, another showed a fierce tiger descending the mountain, and the last was a painting of a night demon. The Taoist immediately focused on these 3 paintings. This is embarrassing. This place is remote, and the local customs are simple. Plus, my home previously housed only my humble wife. Thus, I painted a few pieces, Sir Du hurriedly explained. He glanced at Xianxia, marveling at how he seemed to instantly perceive the mysteries within the paintings. He continued, though I lack the ability of our ancestors to bring the painted figures to life or make the mountains real, the things I've painted possess some spiritual resonance. Coupled with my long contemplation of these paintings, including the one of the 2 tigers fighting over a mountain, I've gained some insights. In this painted world, things that shouldn't come to life can indeed come alive. Sir, your paintings are excellent, the Taoist praised simply, yet he stood there, gazing intently at the paintings for a long time. Sir Du quickly went to kill a chicken with his wife, preparing a sumptuous feast. When they reached the dining table, he felt that there was no fine wine, so he picked up a brush and drew an overturned kettle on the wall. When he placed a cup next to it, exquisite grape wine actually poured out from it. He brought it over to Xianxia, and when he tasted it, he found it especially rich and delightful. As the 2 enjoyed their meal and wine, they chatted leisurely. They talked about this world, the esteemed ancestor, unparalleled painting skills, and the mysteries of existence. As the saying went, there must be something in others' words and actions that one can learn from. In front of them was a master of extraordinary painting skills and a direct descendant of a divine painter. That ancestor could justifiably be called a god of painting. Engaging in conversation with him provided insights even for the Taoist who had come down from the hidden dragon temple. Some confusions that had lingered since his visit to Master Kong years ago were naturally unraveled in their casual talk. The mysteries of heaven and earth and the ways of the world seemed to defy any rules. Yet, upon closer examination, they became clear and distinct. Sometimes, even after much pondering, one might find it hard to grasp, but in a moment of enlightenment, it would reveal itself to be so simple. By the time they had eaten halfway, the wine jug on the wall gradually faded. After chatting a bit longer, it had completely vanished, as if it had never existed at all. Those present, apart from the cat, seemed indifferent to this occurrence. Inside the bamboo house, the Taoist sat cross-legged, staring at the seemingly unchanging scenery outside. He asked, "How do you find this place?" "Meow. How do you find this place?" "It's nice and cool." "Indeed. It's like being in a mouse hole." "What else?" the Taoist turned to ask it. "Do you have any other thoughts regarding this place?" "It doesn't get dark here." "True. We should bring the horse here." "Good idea." "Right." This painted world was both real and illusory. The Taoist continued to sit there, lost in thought and feeling for a long time, before finally pulling down the heavy black curtains and lying down in bed for a peaceful sleep. He had a faint sensation of being watched. Waking naturally, he felt a bit dazed. After getting up, he went out again with Sir Du for a leisurely stroll, discussing the world within the painting. Upon returning, they spread out drawing paper to talk about painting techniques, how spiritual resonance is born, the prohibitions passed down through the Du family, and their deeper meanings. Several days passed, and he gained much from the experience. Finally, Xianxia said his goodbyes to Sir Du. Sir Du was quite surprised, and wanted to ask him to stay for a few more days. "It's been over 10 days since I arrived here, and I've gained enough. Staying longer would be counterproductive. It's better to return and digest what I've learned. I also heard there's a Taoist temple on the mountain, so I'll pay a visit before I leave," the Taoist said, glancing back at the towering mountain behind him. "Since you've made up your mind, I won't impose any longer. If you come again, please seek me out," Sir Du replied. "All right," the Taoist agreed and exchanged bows with him. After taking one last look at the mountain that loomed like a wall behind him, he looked down at the cat beside him and headed up the mountain. \\\\. There was only one path up the mountain, which took about an hour to walk. The temple at the top wasn't large, consisting of just a few rooms with several Taoists inside. The oldest among them was already in his 70s or 80s. According to Sir Du, this old Taoist had entered the painting several decades ago. Back then, he was living in dire straits, suffering from natural disasters, unable to survive outside. When he arrived here, he slowly built the first Taoist temple within the painting halfway up the mountain, and thus, a temple was established in this painted world. It was the only Taoist temple in this world. After Song Yu arrived with the cat, the Taoists in the temple were greatly surprised. When they learned he came from the outside world, their astonishment only grew, and they all gathered around to chat with him. Years ago, the old temple owner was a young Taoist who nearly starved to death. By chance, he found his way here without bringing any Taoist scriptures, and his own understanding of Taoist teachings was quite limited. After arriving, he managed to establish this temple halfway up the mountain, but there was hardly any comprehensive Taoist knowledge passed down. As for spells, it was even more lacking. Among the Taoists outside, more than 9 out of 10 wouldn't know any spells either. Most of the Taoists now in their middle age were disciples taken in by the old temple owner after he established the temple. Although this place was harmonious and peaceful, there were still those who appreciated tranquility or were moved by the old owner's philosophy and chose to come up the mountain to become new Taoists, inheriting his teachings. As they chatted, the old temple owner was stirred and tremblingly came out to greet them. When Song Yu turned to look, he saw that the old Taoist's hair had turned completely white, and he was frail and weak. Though he could still manage to walk, he needed a disciple by his side, ready to support him at any moment. The phrase, worn out, suited this old Taoist perfectly. Feeling intimidated, Song Yu quickly stood up and bowed. "I am Song Yu. I'm honored to meet you, sir." "I am Yuan Mingzi. Pleased to meet you, fellow Taoist." "Please, master, take a seat." A middle-aged Taoist offered a chair, and the old temple owner slowly sat down, looking at the young Taoist. "Young one, you come from the outside." "Indeed." The old Taoist strained to recognize his features, as if his eyesight was failing. His speech was somewhat unclear, but he still asked, "What year is it outside now?" "It is the 4th year of Mengde, in June." "Is the Great Yan still around?" "It is still around." "How long have you been in here?" "About," Song Yu hesitated to find the right words, then said, "It's been about 10 days." "How has the past 10 days been for you?" "The villagers at the foot of the mountain were very hospitable, treating me with fine food and drink. Aside from the lack of day and night here, which I'm not quite used to, everything else is well," Song Yu replied honestly. "Ha ha ha," the old Taoist laughed heartily. "Here, it never gets dark. When you first arrive, it feels very unfamiliar, and it takes a long time to get used to it. If you can't adjust, it can be quite miserable." "Exactly. The people at the foot of the mountain are always very happy when they hear that outsiders are coming. When I first arrived, it was the same for me. I owe them a lot." Indeed, the Taoist remembered the villagers' warmth and hospitality from those days and felt both moved and grateful. "Where are you from, fellow Taoist?" "I'm from Yizhu." "Huh? I'm from Yizhu." Song Yu leaned closer and raised his voice. "Yizhu? Have you heard of it, Taoist elder?" "I've heard of it, but I've never been there." The old Taoist waved his hand as he spoke, seemingly worried that Song Yu might not hear him clearly, then paused for a moment as if he were digging deep into his memory. He then leaned closer to Song Yu's ear and said, "I am originally from Jingzhou." "Jingzhou? Ah, Jingzhou. I've also been to Jingzhou." "What?" The old Taoist not only had unclear speech, but also struggled with hearing, making it quite difficult to converse. Fortunately, Song Yu was very patient. Even the cat, squatting beside them, seemed particularly patient as it sat upright and facing them. When Song Yu spoke, it looked at him. When the temple owner spoke, it looked at him, appearing obedient, which intrigued the Taoists present. Back then, farmers had no land to cultivate and everyone was starving. When disasters struck, many people died of hunger by the roadside. "That was when I came here," the old temple owner said with effort. "Do you know of a place called Mount Zhen in Jingzhou?" "I do. I originally cultivated at the foot of Mount Zhen. I heard that there was a time when many people came from that direction." "That was the time. I've also been to Mount Zhen. That place produces peaches, a lot of peaches, and they're very delicious. I wonder if they're still there now." "When I went, it was late autumn, so there were no peaches. Plus, I didn't go to Mount Zhen. I went to another place," the Taoist replied honestly. "It's a pity I didn't get to see them, so I can't tell you about it, sir." "What a shame." "Indeed. I remember when I was a child, I often went up the mountain to pick peaches. They were really sweet. When the harvest was good, you didn't even have to buy them or steal them. If you passed by and said a few good words, people would let you pick some," the old temple owner said, shaking his head repeatedly with his voice drawn out. He seemed like he was filled with nostalgia for his hometown as he said, "What a pity. This place is great for everything, except for peaches." "When I was at the foot of the mountain, there were also common folk from Jingzhou who came decades ago, and they said they missed it very much," Song Yu said. I guess everyone grew up this way. Who wouldn't miss it? The old temple owner paused for a moment, then turned his head towards Songyu, chattering about the peach blossom hills at the foot of Mount Zhen in Jingzhou. He described how large, sweet, and juicy the peaches were every summer. As he spoke, he became more excited with his face glowing. He laughed occasionally, revealing his 2 remaining teeth. But once he finished, it was as if the feast had come to an end. His expression turned dejected, and he sighed and shook his head. If I had known, I should have brought some peaches with me back then. Even bringing 2 peach pits would have been good. Who could have thought of that back then? Indeed, the old temple owner shook his head. I still remember it was the 9th year of Changyuan. There was a great disaster in the 9th year of Changyuan. How long has it been outside? If it's the 9th year of Changyuan. Songyu paused to think and calculate before answering. If I'm not mistaken, it's been 55 years now. At that time, I was 26. So now you must be 81. I'm 81 already. The old temple owner looked up at the sky, feeling emotional. Sir, you've lived a long life. What's so special about having a long life? As long as there's no war, no hunger, and no hardship, most people will live long as they can safely enter adulthood. The old temple owner sighed helplessly as he spoke, turning to look at the few disciples beside him. He urged, Don't just sit here. Go get something to eat and treat this Taoist friend well. All of you go. Several middle-aged Taoists quickly left. Some went to pick vegetables, some went to get meat and fish, and others started a fire to boil water, each busy with their tasks. Only then did the old temple owner lean closer to Songyu and ask again, Did you meet someone with the surname Du before you came in? Indeed. How did you get in? It was also by fate. Of course, if you could enter, it's because of fate. Then how did you come in, sir? How did I come in? The old temple owner turned to look at the mountain behind him, squinting as he recalled for a long time before sighing. At that time, we were starving, looking everywhere for a way to survive. We met a person who was almost captured to be eaten. After we rescued him, he followed us for a while, and one day he told us that those looking for a way to survive could follow him. We were hanging by a thread, and many people believed him. Those who believed followed him. It was one night, and we couldn't see anything, but we just followed him, walking and walking until we ended up here. It's also by fate. However, before we left, he told us not to tell anyone. Over the years, I've never mentioned it to anyone, the old temple owner added, then warned him, Taoist friend, you shouldn't mention it everywhere either, lest the gods on the mountain find out and hold you accountable. The gods on the mountain. Songyu turned to glance at the mountain peak, a smile spreading across his face. Do you know that there are gods on the mountain? Of course. What do they look like? It's hard to say. Have you seen them with your own eyes? Of course I have. The old temple owner's eyes widened as he exclaimed, The reason I built the temple here on this mountain is that, when I was young, I went up the mountain to chop wood and saw this god once. I saw him twice more afterward. And when someone down in the valley forgot the ancestral teachings passed down by their forefathers, acting arrogantly and oppressing others, they were struck by lightning and killed. Wasn't that the work of the gods on the mountain? Besides, the fact that we can live in seclusion here is also due to the gods manifesting. That person with the surname Du. Perhaps he was a god, transformed in a human form. Now I see. Songyu glanced up at the mountain once more. The cat followed suit, turning its head to look at the mountain as well. But all they saw were the lush greenery and the pink clouds illuminated by the sunset. There were no gods in sight. It seemed that this scene held spirituality. When Songyu withdrew his gaze, the old temple owner had already shakily stood up, calling him to come eat in the temple. With no reason to refuse, Songyu respectfully assisted him as they made their way to the temple. Inside, several Taoists had killed a chicken and prepared pickled fish and dried meat. Although there were only a few dishes, each was served in large bowls, filling more than half the table, and it felt like each bowl could feed several people. They chatted and ate, both parties enjoying themselves immensely. After the meal, as Songyu was preparing to leave, the old temple owner stood unsteadily and asked him, What are your plans after this, Taoist friend? I plan to take a stroll around the mountain and then head down. What I meant was, what are your plans afterward? If you're going to stay at the foot of the mountain, where will you settle? If you have no place to go, you might as well stay in the temple, the old temple owner said. He added, I'm not afraid of you laughing. When I was out there, the reason I came to the mountain to be a Taoist was just to earn a meal. When I came in, I was young and didn't learn any skills. If you could come, that would be a wonderful thing. The temple owner's good intentions are appreciated, but I'm actually just a fake Taoist, and don't understand much about Taoist scriptures. Songyu felt touched and sincerely bowed. He nodded and contemplated for a moment. Then he lifted his head and asked the old temple owner, "I wonder if there are any brushes and ink in the temple." "Of course there are." "Are there any pigments?" "There are a few kinds." "May I borrow them for a bit?" "Go get them." Before long, the brushes, ink, and pigments were brought over. The young Taoist took the brushes and ink, stepped outside the temple, and looked around before he found the outermost white wall. He began to paint, meticulously outlining the trunk and branches, then adding leaves. The others didn't recognize the tree, and even the old temple owner, whose eyesight had long faded, couldn't see clearly. Even when the Taoist painted fruit on the branches, the middle-aged Taoists couldn't tell what it was. It wasn't until the young Taoist added bright red to the fruit that the ink blurred and blended with the white wall, making it look similar to real peaches, that the old temple owner finally focused his attention. A peach tree had appeared on the white wall. The painting skills weren't exceptional, and the result wasn't remarkable. Yet, the effort he had put in made it seem as if he had been aided by a divine force, allowing him to capture a certain spiritual resonance in his work. After finishing the painting, the Taoist stared at it for a long time. Then he blew on the wall. Whoosh! Suddenly, the painting seemed to come to life. It appeared as if faint white smoke was dispersing, or perhaps it wasn't. Everyone felt a bit dazed, some blinking, others rubbing their eyes. Suddenly realizing that the painting on the wall had changed, they became increasingly realistic. Although the branches and twigs of the peach tree were still somewhat the same, the colors of the leaves and fruit had distinctly transformed, taking on a three-dimensional quality with clear light and shadow. In the blink of an eye, it seemed as though the painting was no longer on the white wall, but had instead grown outside of it. Wait, how could the painting have moved outside the wall? It was clear that a peach tree had actually sprouted beside the wall.